let's dive into it. Firstly, like a huge thank you for taking the next half an hour to chat with Charlie and I. We're really excited to be here today to talk about this topic, which is all around scaling customer success. I think it's a really topical one. It's something that I definitely hear a lot and have conversations around. So yeah, I think today is going to be super insightful, and hopefully those of you joining today will take some really great takeaways from the call from all of Charlie's great wisdom. So my name is Lucy. I'm an account manager at Hook, and today I'm joined by Charlie from GWI, which is a real pleasure. And so, Charlie, I'll throw to you to do a quick introduction.
Nice, thank you, Lucy. So, morning or afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. So my name's Charlie. I am a senior customer success exec, working at GWI. I've been here for about a year. It'll be a year next month. But I've been in customer success slash account management for like the last 4 to 5 years. GWI is a consumer insights platform. We survey people from all around the world, and then companies will buy that data, and then as CSMs we come in, step in to support them with the platform, to help them find the data they need for like marketing or whatever the use case is. Yeah.
Nice, great introduction. And interesting, we've just seen the poll results come through. It seems like this is a really topical time to be talking about scaling customer success, because either people are a little bit stuck on where to start, or you're starting to build that scaled motion. So yeah, really great timing. A little bit of housekeeping. This is going to be recorded, so we will send a copy of the webinar to each of you that have joined, and for any of your colleagues that perhaps missed out. We'll leave some time at the end for questions. So Steve, I know you just mentioned that the chat's not working. Feel free to pop any questions you might have in the Q&A, and we'll leave 5 or 10 minutes at the end to get to those. So to start today's conversation off, I think, and it's kind of related to the poll actually, I think when we think about like scaling customer success, and like actually going from a manual workflow to a digital, actually like starting that journey and understanding like what is the key starting point can be really hard. And I think what I like in particular for myself and those in customer success around me, what we often hear is, in customer success, we're super stretched, and we don't have any time to kind of focus on anything else other than our day to day, which I think often becomes like quite manual and quite reactive. And so I think a good starting point is like when like for yourself, Charlie, when you've started this scaled motion, like was there like a specific breaking point for you in your workflows that actually meant shifting to more of like a scaled customer success approach was actually not optional, but it was actually really necessary?
Yeah, definitely. I think with like the platform, like GWI, we're constantly like developing the platform, new features released, data sets released, and so on. Like last year, we released or we launched our AI tool, Agent Spark, which is like a LE sort of LLM, kind of like ChatGPT, Copilot, or so on, to help clients get to the data that they needed. So naturally, when you're releasing new features onto the platform, comes the need for more training and support. And I think the business basically realized actually um, CSMs and account execs were essentially spending around like 50% of their time supporting like the lower value accounts who, they're paying clients, they still need support. But I think from a long-term perspective, it was like, right, do we move to increasing headcount, or do we use the tools available to us to our advantage, where we look at maybe scaling this a little bit? So on the back of that, the business went through a few months of conversations, and then the Essentials plan was basically launched. So it was myself and also Colin, who's based in Singapore. We were brought in to launch it from like a customer success side of thing. So we've got about 400 accounts in our patch. So if we were going to try and do that manually, like, say goodbye to like your weekends and your evenings, which I'm sure is probably illegal, but like it just wasn't an option. We needed automations ultimately to help us support our clients, because yeah, you could say, yeah, it's about saving time and saving on headcount, that these are paying clients, regardless if they're lower value. So they still need that support. So being able to set up these automations, it really helped us from the very beginning, um, cover as much ground as we possibly could, without trying to do it manually and ultimately probably failing.
For sure. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I think my next question is around like, one of the poll answers was like trying to start building this scaled motion, but I'm a little bit stuck. And so I imagine when, yourself and Colin, you sat down and you thought about like what this new world would look like, there was probably quite a lot of fear, but also, opportunity for you to work with. And I guess when you think about there being lots of opportunity, it's like, where do you actually then start with automating those workflows? And perhaps that's like a little bit overwhelming. And so instead of like trying to automate everything from the start, where did your like proof of concept begin?
Yeah, so we started out with like a little test. Like we've got a load of materials like on-demand videos, webinars, reports, and so on. So we kind of collated that all in one place with like a resources page, right? So a way to test this out, we basically set up an automation targeting all of our active users and decision makers as well. We sent this email to them. Basically, it was an engagement email, but it was also kind of a test, right? Um, but it kind of just allowed us to see what this process could kind of look like and how we could build upon that. Um, as part of the test, we got an idea about open rates and click rates, and also how we would kind of like format these emails because you run the risk of them being kind of generic. So we kind of wanted to try and avoid that where possible. Um, but I think one of the benefits as well, especially if you're at scale, like we emailed around like 2,000 like clients or users, and on the back of that, we received like a lot of bounce backs for like inactive users, right? So it kind of helps you clean up things a little bit where there's just a load of like dead users just sitting in the platform. So it gives you an opportunity to reach out to those clients, say, we've got a bounce back, let's reassign the seat, and ultimately try and encourage an increase in that usage. So that was like the main test. But the next one that we launched was the onboarding cadence. So our onboarding cadence, the way we set that up, as soon as a new user is set up in the platform, they'll flow through to Hook, and then it will trigger the first email. We've got like 8 or 9 emails set up. So the first few are like within the first month, and it's kind of like making sure they're able to log in, they've confirmed their account, giving them kind of the basics to navigate their way around the platform. And then we start spacing them out a little bit, kind of focusing on more of like the advanced advice based on where we would think that they would be at the 3 month point or the 4 month point or whichever. And ultimately, you don't want to be spamming clients, right? You don't want to send an email every single day because then they're just going to go straight to spam. Leave me alone. Um, so that's ultimately where we like kind of started out. Um, with the onboarding, like we launched the essentials plan back in October, and we've actually sent around like 1,300 emails just for onboarding alone. You can imagine how much time that's actually like saved us. Um, but those two things, like I think onboarding was like crucial for us. As soon as a new user's set up, we want to make sure that they're not being forgotten about and that we're not realizing that at like the renewal stage from the very beginning, we're giving them all the tools they need to hopefully get the value from the platform like as soon as possible.
For sure. We often hear onboarding being one of the kind of first part, like first pieces in the customer journey that teams do look to automate. And it sounds like, from your test case and to where you are now, and we'll get into results a little bit later. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. That you can really get some like quick wins and give you back just a ton of time to focus on other value add for your customers. I guess like, and I can put my hand up and say that this is something that I have a bit of a fear around. I think as customer success managers, you're so focused on relationships, and that's like part of what you love about being a customer success manager, building relationships with your customers. And so I think that sometimes there's maybe like this fear of losing the human touch. And so what specific, like as you and Colin were starting to map out like where to start, how we run the test, and then how we move forward from there, like what specific guardrails or feedback loops perhaps did you actually implement to make sure that whilst you were scaling your approach and outreach to your customers, it didn't mean that it wasn't impersonal?
Yeah, I think it's very easy to go into like it being maybe impersonal, like, but I think the thing with Hook as well, like you can make it as specific as you want. Of course, if you send out an email to 200 people saying, "Hi, how are you?" Like it's not really saying anything, right? The same rules apply for your manual emails as your automations. There needs to be a clear goal. There needs to be some sort of value from that client, or if there's something actionable, it needs to be clear for them to look at that email and go, "I know why they're emailing me," regardless of whether it's automated. Um, I think it also depends on what your goal is. So for us, like, we sell access to a platform. The platform's designed to be more like self-serve. Um, so if you've got all the tools available, you should be able to navigate your way through. And we're still available if you have any questions. Um, but I think in my previous role, one of our KPIs was like a quarterly check-in. So it could be anything from a quarterly call or like a full QBR, right? So you do the whole thing of like sending out the emails, sending a load of voicemails, all the wonderful things that we know and love. So we basically figured out, right, let's automate that first step. As soon as that CTA is launched and that quarterly call is due, we'll automate an email that basically reaches out to the client from our inbox saying, "Hi, let's get a call booked in over the next few weeks." And then you basically share your calendar in there so they can book that slot whatever time works for them. And then you kind of you can encourage them. We used to force them just so that we would have visibility, but we'd encourage them to leave a comment and basically say, "This is also what I want to discuss," because you'd have a list of things, but gives them the time to maybe think about, right, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to bring to the table? This is the challenge I'm having, and so on. So we found actually just including that one automated step, it saved us so many voicemails, so many emails, and also it just meant that the interactions that we were having, that were still valuable because some clients would answer the phone. You'd catch them at like 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, and out of the blue completely, and you know that they're probably not even listening, right? Because we've all got a job to do, we've all got work. So I think it just made that time that you had like valuable, and made the touch point with them. It made it actually mean something in terms of like supporting them, addressing any challenges that maybe they were facing at that time.
For sure. And I think that one of the things you just touched on there, like which is such a a small gesture of like, hey, we're coming together, we're having a QBR, like what is it that you want to talk about? Like that's where you can have just such a valuable conversation. And so I really like that. And that's such a personal touch too. And so I guess with that, there's a ton of stuff that you're automating, and it sounds like you're then coming together. You're still coming together and talking to your customers, but that's more like centered around value, and the automation's really around a lot of the manual stuff that we often do as customer success managers. That maybe don't add that same value as a QBR, where we really understand their goals, what they're trying to achieve, and help them map towards that. So if we think about like the manual tasks, that you were doing versus not, like what have you officially like stopped doing in your workflow? And I think that the second part of that, and I think this would be super interesting for the audience as well, is like now that you have that time back, where are you spending that time?
So I think definitely onboarding. It saved us so, like I said, like the 1,300 emails. Like you can imagine how much time that's actually saved us. Um, I think we're still getting renewals over the line like manually. We're kind of gradually working towards like an auto renewal process. But at the moment, a lot of our time is working on those renewals, negotiating, chasing, and just supporting to get those deals over the line. So onboarding absolutely like has been like the biggest time saver. I think it also allows us to be like really consistent as well. If you think about, maybe you might have like your own little draft set up, which technically you could set up as an automation today, but for us to be consistent as a department as well, um yeah, it's been a huge time saver. But yeah, eventually we will probably start to automate some of that, the renewal process, but at the moment, yeah. we're kind of around that area.
That makes sense and exciting to see what follows as well. Um, and so we've had a discussion around like how you started to map this out, and where you're saving time and now where you're spending that. And so this journey's been over the last 6 months. It's going to continue, building and testing. And so you talked about open rates of emails as part of that testing phase, but I'd love to get into like kind of bigger outcomes next, if that's okay. And so over the last like 6 months, like beyond efficiency, which is a huge play, like what was the main KPI that really dictated your scale strategy? And how have you gone about like measuring the impact of that with the scale motion?
Yes, I think the main thing was renewal rates, like absolutely like at the top. We needed to make sure that like what we were creating and what we were delivering to these clients, like it was enough to ensure that when it came to the renewal conversation, that they'd seen the value, that they realized the ROI that they were getting, and like it was clear as possible, right? And I think ultimately that comes down for us how confident that client is in using the platform, accessing the data that they need. So I think for us, like when we launched in October, since we've launched, like the renewal rates that we've seen, it's been like a 10% increase. First year renewal rates are increasing. We've also seen a drop in like inactive users and also inactive accounts. So overall, like those are the metrics that we've kind of been using to track that the effectiveness of this. But because it's been like 5, 6 months, like we can't take the full credit, right? Because these are like 12-month contracts. But when it gets to like September, October, like we're taking all of it. Um, but I think ultimately, like it is when you look at the renewal rates, and I think like for me, I've worked in like I've used automations in CS before, so I know the impact that it can actually have. But I think for the business, I think they weren't sure, and I think it's kind of surpassed their expectations as well. And some of the automations that we've created, we've now launched them with like mid-market and majors. So we're able to assess this on like a larger scale. It's not just like lower value accounts. We're now having a bit of an impact on like the higher value ones as well. So yeah, I think overall, like I think the business is very happy with what we're doing. But I think ultimately it does come down to what you create. You can be as like specific as possible, and like I said, you want to be personal or impersonal, right? If you want to use automations to get those touch points in with those clients, or maybe you're completely stretched and you need to take a little bit of a step back, you can kind of create it however you want. But yeah, when you get to the renewal rate side of things, that's when you actually see, right, hopefully what we're doing is having an impact.
For sure. And you just touched on a few interesting points, but one in particular that I think I like really feel quite strongly about is like automation is not just for your long tail accounts. Like you really can get value from automation through other segments, but I think often the view is that it is limited to your long tail. So I'm glad you raised that. And so with this new world, where you've set up these automations, you're giving yourself back time, focusing on renewals is the biggest piece for you. And so how are you like using like data that you have access to actually decide on, and we'll kind of use the renewal as an example. Like how are you using like data signals that you have to actually decide when your customer perhaps needs a human intervention versus when they should stay in maybe the renewal cadence of your renewals in 90 days, your renewal 60 days out, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I think when we started using Hook, my manager Lou, she actually used the signals to automate forecasting. So for CSMs, like it's standard process every Friday, update all your notes, make sure everything's up to date, kind of thing. And for us, like again, to do that with for 400 accounts or however many are in that quarter, like it's just not sustainable. So Lou set these up. So whether it's like best case, pipeline, or so on. So when we're actually looking at our accounts as a whole on Hook, like you can actually see, right, where are these clients sitting? And it's based on different criteria, like, like payments and usage and engagement and so on. But it allows us to basically say, right, if this is the best case, right, we can just send the renewal to them, and then if they get back to us, that's fine. But there's other ones that maybe would flag, that maybe we would approach it a little bit more sensitively, where we'd reach out to them like ourselves without it being maybe automated at that first step. Maybe addressing some of the problems, saying, you haven't been in the platform for X amount of time, or, are you aware of like the new features and so on, trying to get that value in there ahead of maybe discussing the renewal. Um, but I think that in that sense, like these signals for forecasting have been like really helpful for us. Um, and yeah, hopefully, again, I'm sure some of the other CSMs that do it manually still would probably really hope that we'll start automating that for them as well. But at the moment, it's just essentials.
For sure. I'm actually, I mean, there's far more things for me to ask you, but I think I might just ask one more question before we go to the Q&A, if that's okay. So I think for a lot of it seems that a lot of people that have joined today are either stuck on where to start, or they've started but perhaps need a little bit of guidance. And as you have not only set up the scaled motion at your previous company, but now GWI, you're seeing a ton of results. You're kind of just at the start of your journey, really, and looking to build on that and build more success, which I'm really excited to follow along and see where that goes. Like, what would be your, like, for a CSM that is still stuck in a very manual grind, what is like one specific automation? Doesn't need to be an automation, maybe it's like a workflow that they should maybe go to their desk on Monday morning and think about changing?
Um, well, I think firstly, like for this role and my previous role, I've been very fortunate. We've had like an amazing ops teams for like both companies. So in order for you to like have all these automations, you need everything to be running in the background. Yeah, so we've got an amazing team at GWI that helps there. So I think that's probably a good starting point. Otherwise things would get a bit messy. But I think like the main automation, it kind of just depends. In my previous role, we sold credits. In this role, we sell access. So I guess for us, like our main concern would be inactive users. So again, set that up on Hook. Like for example, we say if you haven't logged in or like had any activity for like the last 3 months, we would consider you inactive, and that will trigger an email. And I think on the back of like what I said previously, if you get bounce backs and so on, you can like it kind of gives you more of a reason to reach out to that client and say, we need to get these seats reassigned. You paid for this subscription, we want to see you get the value from it. And then also you're touching on engagement, it benefits the renewal. And I think like the inactive one as a starting point is kind of a bit of an all-rounder.
Yeah, definitely. Love that. Okay, we have 5 minutes, so I do want to get to some questions before we wrap up. One of the questions that has come through, which I personally find quite interesting actually, is around how you work with your manager to continue to build on this and also like prioritize accordingly. So what's your piece of advice there?
I think like again, I'm quite lucky. Like my manager Lou, like she's just on it, right? And I think when we were looking at building this automation, like she was so hands-on, and I think it's really useful because especially I was quite new when I was brought in. So I think with Lou, like you're looking at maybe some of the automations that you think might work. Lou will give you the advice to basically say, right, this could work, but we need to refine it a little bit because I think it's all fine learning. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not robots. But if you can kind of remove some of that learning at the start and ensure that it's a little bit more of an success from the beginning, um, I think that's helpful. But I think having a manager that actually understands like what you do and how automations can benefit CS, I think makes the world of difference. So it's easy, like in my setup, it's easy. Yeah.
Awesome. I think everyone would love to hear that it's easy. I think that will give everyone a bit of confidence walking away today.
Yeah.
Another interesting question that's come through is around, have you over automated anything?
So we, well, like the CRM we use, when we were looking at some of the activity, one of the clients, I think they received 3 emails within the space of 2 days, which is spam, whatever way you look at it, right? Um, and to be fair, out of like all the emails we sent for the onboarding, we did actually get one person to answer us and say, "Leave us alone, I don't need your help." But out of like thousands, right? That's pretty positive. Um, But I think one of the filters that you can use on Hook is like last contacted. So we set it for like a week. So if we send out one cadence, they're not going to receive anything else until like at least a week, which again prevents us from like spamming this client where they're like, oh, yeah, I got your emails, all 10 of them last week. Um, so you kind of want to avoid that. But again, with all the filters that you've got on Hook, like it's super simple and easy to do and to avoid. But again, it's all learning, especially when you're new to it. You're going to come across some issues. Um, yeah, again, yeah, as I said, it's all learning.
I guess that's part of the testing phase to iron that out and just be kind to yourself because it is new and you are setting, building it from the ground up. So not
Yeah,
everything's right all the time. Um, Another question is around like when you're adding value to your customers now that where are you adding value to your customers now that you've scaled onboarding and enablement? You've perhaps touched on this a little bit.
yeah, I think like it just allows us to be really consistent. And I think for some of the lower value accounts that maybe are more self-sufficient, they'll see this as an upgrade. They'll be like, right, you're emailing me with all of these useful like training materials, all these useful tips, any sort of new releases, we'll be letting you know as soon as possible. And also, if you do fall into the criteria of inactive or your usage starts to drop, or you are a champion user or anything like that, we'll be reaching out to you. And we've created it in a way like Colin based in Singapore, like he's been absolutely brilliant. He's like mapped all this out like from like a 12-month perspective. Um, so so yeah, there's actually so many ways that we are probably providing value to these clients. But yeah, I would say for the lower value accounts that see this as an upgrade, I reckon they'll probably be some of the ones at the top for us anyway in essentials.
Nice. Maybe one more question before we round up. Someone just asked around what are the top pitfalls to look out for when you start developing the program?
What are the pitfalls for automations?
For, I guess, building the scaled program.
I think it's you need to have a good understanding of who your clients are. Like I said, when I joined GWI in April, I was brought in August, and I
Mhm.
didn't have enough experience at that time to understand all of the clients' pain points and what would be beneficial. Which is why Colin, like GWI, is obviously lucky that Colin was here. But I think you need to understand who your clients are, what the challenges are, and ultimately how these emails can impact them in a positive way. You don't want it to just be a tick box of sending out emails and fingers crossed, hope for the best that you renew. Um, I think you need to, yeah, have a good understanding about what you're selling, who your clients are, and if you can be as specific as possible. I think that's how you can maybe avoid leaning into maybe generic territory.
Love that. Yeah, good piece of advice. We might pause then there because we're basically at time. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to yourself, Charlie, for sharing like so much great content and so many great takeaways with the audience. I think for me, even in particular, I'm close to your story and how you've done this, but I still have learned something new today. So thank you. Charlie has also offered for anyone on the call today that would like to connect with him on LinkedIn to do so, and is happy to kind of talk a bit more about how he's developed the scaled motion for anyone that's interested. So yeah, we'll leave you with that. Go enjoy the rest of your afternoon, or perhaps it is still morning, and we'll be back with the monthly sync soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.